This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Welcome back. Thank you guys for all your comments. Everybody's been very, very cool as this has gone on. And, Jay actually brought up a good point, too. Pat Riley was a sixth man as well. So if there ever needs to be a conversation to be had about the impact of a sixth man, I'm sure Pat could sit down and chat with him a little bit. So we've got this game coming up tonight against the Portland Trailblazers. And, Portland is... I mean, they're trying to figure out who they are right now without Damian Lillard, and that may be who they're going to have to be potentially for the rest of the season. We don't know. I mean, if they're out of playoff contention, does it really make a whole lot of sense to try to rush Dame back, even if he wants to be on the floor? So they get back C.J. McCollum. Norman Powell's somebody who's done well for them, and yet this is one of those games where you look at it on the schedule, Ira, and you say, you got to find a way to come away with a win however possible in this game tonight. And obviously every team is professional, but this is one that I think you would have to circle and say, this is when you got to get a dub in.
Yeah, they went to Portland. They won without Bam and without Jimmy. So now they're playing Portland without Kyle. But as much as you're banged up, like we talked about the entire show here on the Slomin's home shield, inside the paint, the Heat have the depth to compensate. I'm not so sure Portland does. Now, C.J. McCollum is back. He missed that game in Portland, but Larry Nance Jr. is out. We don't know where they stand with the rest of their injury situation. They're a kind of a med team without their superstar. There's two ways to build NBA rosters. There's the big three, the big four, the depth of talent, and the one-man leading man. Both styles have been effective. Certainly Kevin Durant, if he's playing, his team is a great team automatically, except for last year's blip. Same thing with Steph Curry. But Portland has been so Dame-centric with those 30-foot pull-up three-pointers and what he does, that everything changes without him. They have a rookie coach in Chauncey Billups. Their defense has been ghastly. So I would think without Kyle Lowry, on your home court, this is one you have to get. You want to finish up your homestand 3-1. You had the blip against Philly, like you said at the top of the show on the crossover with Big O. They just couldn't make a shot. That'll happen. Once every month or so, you're going to have a 1 of 10, 1 of 11. You have those kind of games. So you have to get this one. You want to end the homestand on an upbeat 3-1 note. Take 3 out of every 4 at home. Go 500 on the road. You'll be fine seeding-wise also. Heat are shorthanded. Blazers are shorter-handed.
Shorter-handed. I like that. And so then you got coming up in Atlanta again on Friday. And, I don't typically like when you have to play the same team this many times in a short period of time, because it just naturally, you hit that point of equilibrium where it's like one team figures something out about the other they can exploit, and it's kind of like a playoff series. And yet this Hawks team, despite the fact they were able to come back and win the other night against Milwaukee, there just seems to be something so off about this team right now. And I'm not sure why the defense is so bad, but it felt like the Heat didn't play well defensively in that game in Miami the other night. And it felt like one of those games that if you're going to lose one of these games to Atlanta, it's because you're not hitting your switches how you should be. They were taking advantage of Omer Yurtseven. And now I would think this is a game that you'd feel pretty good about with having Bam back and with having a number of guys that you've been able to throw at Trae Young and give him a lot of problems. Caleb Martin being right at the front of that.
I don't think it's a number of guys. I think literally Trae probably is going to wake up in a cold sweat that morning, realize Caleb is back. I mean, look, I don't want to be the guy to do it because I know the Heat will tell me, don't do that. So I'm not going to call Caleb Martin a Trae Young stopper.
Oh, no.
He's been that the last 2 games. Look, he was dynamic against Trae Young in Atlanta when Jimmy was out. Jimmy comes back, and remember after that game, Clay, he said, look, if Spo wants to start Caleb ahead of me so I don't have to run around with that little guy and guard him, I'm all for that also. So again, it's like when we spoke about playoffs and we spoke about matchups and who you're putting up against different people. That's why when I look at the Eastern Conference and I look at matchups, you mentioned it in our previous segment here, that the Heat have enough defensive-oriented players to go against Brooklyn's big three and at least give you matchups, that they have a guy they could put on everyone, whether it's a P.J. Tucker or a Bam on Durant, whether you're going to use Lowry on Harden or Kyrie Irving and Jimmy Butler, Caleb. You have that. You have that against Atlanta now. They found the secret sauce with Caleb Martin. The one thing I don't know if they have, and I'm curious about, and this is the loss on this homestand, is the Joel Embiid stopper. Omer Yurtseven certainly was not that the other day. Joel Embiid has gotten his points against Bam also. So you look at matchups, and it's interesting, Clay, because as we go through the schedule, we're at a point right now where the Heat are percentage points out of first place, but they've also beaten that first place team twice. They're 2-0 against the Bulls. They're right there, in games behind. They're tied. It's just percentage points. it's all about matchups. And I
Mhm.
said this after the game against Toronto. I think you'd agree, Clay. As much as the Heat came out with the W, that was a grueling, grueling game for the Heat. Would you agree with that on the Toronto game?
It was, and I saw your tweet, and I do like this discussion, so go with where you're going with this.
So I'm saying is it's all about matchups. So let's say the Heat finishes 2, and Toronto playing around whatever winds up 7. That sucker could easily go 7 games. These teams have a history. Nick Nurse against Eric Spoelstra, you wind up being in it for the long haul. The other matchup I'm concerned about is let's say the Heat wind up 3, maybe 4, and go against Cleveland in the first round. Cavaliers are 2-0 against the Heat. They are highly unique with their length. The Heat are somewhat undersized. Bam is undersized as a center. PJ Tucker is undersized as a power forward. And Duncan Robinson, not physical stature, but he doesn't play big if he has to guard a Lowry Markkinen, not a Marky Lowernin. I think she was a night court or something, but that's a different story for a different day.
Marky Post.
To me, it's all about matchups. It's about who you want and who you're going to get in the first round. But I think Toronto and Cleveland in potential matchups, maybe even Philly in a 4-5 will be difficult. So it's as much about who you are as who you're going to face. And I think it's interesting. The East is good this year. The East is 6 or 7 teams deep. Right now, there's a 6-team scramble for the top seeds in the East when you include Philadelphia, Chicago, Cleveland, Miami, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee. And then you have sort of lurking down there also a Toronto team that is just damn feisty, and maybe even a Charlotte team that could be the same. So there's not going to be an easy first-round matchup. There's not going to be somewhere where you see, unless you play the Knicks, there's not going to be somewhere where you seed yourself and say, hey, we'll get through the first round, we'll deal with the second round. You could have 3 tough rounds in the East this season.
Yeah, and there are levels to all of this. So Cleveland, I think, is the one that would scare me a little bit more because I think you've got the big man matchups, multiple, because, I mean, those guys, what they can roll out at you. Jared Allen has always been a guy that I think it's extremely underrated. And I think the fact that, now they're starting to win a little bit, people are starting to figure out just how good he is. Obviously, you've got Mobley, who you would think is going to get even better as the season goes on. They always say those guys aren't rookies by the time playoffs roll around. But Darius Garland has emerged as just this star type talent who is kind of coming into his role. And it's kind of crazy that you think Colin Sexton isn't even going to play. And so it's almost like because he's been out, Garland has been able to grow. And it started with Ricky Rubio kind of being able to bring that group together. He's obviously out. That team would scare me a little bit more. The reason why Toronto doesn't scare me that much is when it gets into the half-court game, who are you afraid of? And look, Fred VanVleet, you're right. He was able to hunt Tyler Hero the other night. I don't think that happens in the playoffs. I don't think the Heat allow that to happen in the playoffs. So when I get into that half-court game, you're right, by the way, that their length is something that would disrupt you and cause you some problems offensively. And, you're going to have to rely on some guys to beat some one-on-one matchups. I don't think there's anybody offensively that scares me. And I think Fred VanVleet is very, very good. But I also think the same thing that you're seeing with Caleb Martin guarding Trae Young, you can do similar things with him on VanVleet. And as long as he can't cause switches, you're going to have another long defender on the perimeter that's going to go out on him. So there's just nobody on there. And obviously they had Gary Trent Jr. when they play, and he didn't play the other night. I just don't see the same level of concern if I'm going up against Toronto in the first round as I would against Cleveland. Maybe I'm crazy.
I still think it could be a grueling series because of that length.
Oh, I agree with that. Yes.
So it could take something out of you before you play Milwaukee or Brooklyn in the second round as well. So, it's a good year for the Heat. They're going to get a high playoff seed. It's not a good year for getting one of these walkover first round matchups. I'm not so sure you're going to be able to accomplish that this season. I think you're going to have to play your way through each round.
All right, and so coming up for the rest of this stretch, you've got the Lakers at home on Sunday night, and man, I just don't. I never saw the fit with LeBron and Russell Westbrook to begin with. Right. I understand that they're clearly working through some things, and right now what it seems like Frank Vogel is doing is it's not just, hey, we're going to throw everything that we can to win this game tonight. They're trying to find an identity. And, obviously you've got LeBron James. So you say, oh, well, you don't need an identity. Well, you do, because that team let go of a lot of role players that were integral to their championship. And now it's just like, man, you got the 3 stars. One of them doesn't play. The other 2, the games just don't seem to be mixing very well. And then where are your role players that you can kind of, where's Alex Caruso? We see what he's doing in Chicago. Where's Contavious Caldwell-Pope? Where's Kyle Kuzma? We see those guys playing well in their new stuff. Those are guys who gave the Heat problems in the NBA Finals. Right now, the Lakers are a team that I don't see it, Ira, and maybe maybe I'll be the latest guy who's proven to be an idiot for doubting a LeBron James-led team. I don't see how this team comes together, and I certainly don't see it as a matchup that scares me on Sunday night.
Except they're a different team with Anthony Davis. And I still think with Anthony Davis and LeBron James are playing and are together and are healthy in a playoff situation where individual players win games, I still think they could find a way to work through. When your supporting cast doesn't matter as much, I still think any team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, I'm putting Russell Westbrook aside. He's a wild card. He could be great. He could be awful. You almost don't know game to game. I still fear them if Anthony Davis is at the top of his game and is healthy. So I still need to see those two together. And I still think that makes them a formidable opponent. It was crazy. It's like the Heat reunion weekend. You're going to have LeBron James back. You're going to have Wayne Ellington back. You're going to have Trevor Ariza back. You're going to have, Kendrick Nunn. I know he's injured, but he'll be coming back also. So you have plenty of former Heat faces there who played for the Lakers. So it'll be an interesting game. Not the marquee game that you originally thought, but still, enough interest there. Look, it's the Lakers. You always get up for the Lakers. That's part of the Lakers' problem. So I think it'll be a fun night. I know some people will be watching in NFL playoffs. Can't help that. But I think it'll always be a fun night. I think anytime the Lakers show up, it just becomes interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And they're always going to get a team's best shot, and the Heat are no different. And look, we're saying all this, and we really don't know when Kyle Lowry is going to be back, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later. Hopefully everything that's going on with him and his family, everything gets straightened out fairly quickly. C. Dola points out that LeBron is playing center right now, and he's right. I mean, they're having to switch off a bit and find a way to kind of cobble things together right now until Anthony Davis comes back. I think the bigger question with them is, will Anthony Davis ever be fully healthy for a long stretch? But you're right, to your point, last year, first round of the playoffs, they gave Phoenix a bit of a scare. And, it wasn't what was a game 3 or game 4, whatever it was, that was kind of teetering for a bit. And had they won that, things would have felt a lot different. Maybe it was game 2. But anyway, point being, yeah, it's a team that when they're fully healthy, they got the stars. Real quickly, Ira, let's go back to the Omer Yurtseven thing. How do you see this playing out throughout the rest of these next few weeks? Do you think it is as simple as Erik Spoelstra is going to stay with his rotations and Bam's going to start as long as he's healthy, and then Dedmon's going to be that first center off the bench, and Yurt is kind of going back and he's going to be relegated to mop-up duty?
I think Eric's going to go out of his way to try to get some minutes to keep the kid engaged and involved. I think tonight could be the game. He played very well against Nurkic. I think he had like 14 points and 17 rebounds in the game of Portland. So I think Erik Spoelstra looks for spots where he can wind up if the other team stays big. And Clay, this is the problem. Plenty of times lately, we've seen this, especially when Bam was out. The other team was so small that your center was PJ Tucker or Caleb Martin at the end of games. When teams downsized instead, then you're not playing Dedmon or playing Yurtseven. So I think Erik Spoelstra is going to look for a couple of spots there where he can give Yurt his minutes just to keep his head in the game. So if Bam does miss time, if the thumb does act up, if a back-to-back next weekend they have a back-to-back, they have 2 games at American Airlines Arena against the Clippers and the Raptors. Matter of fact, I know we'll talk about this in next week's show, and it'll be interesting. But after they play the Knicks on Wednesday, I believe it is, then they play on Friday at home against the Clippers, Saturday at home against Toronto, off Sunday, Monday in Boston, Tuesday in Toronto. Now, the NBA has gotten rid of 4 games in 5 nights. However, because of the cancellation in San Antonio, they had to rejigger the travel schedule for the Heat next week. So I do wonder, in a 4 games in 5 nights, maybe Bam gets a rest, maybe Dedmon gets a rest. So I do think there will be Omer Yurtseven opportunities, but not to the degree that my readers at AskIra@SunSentinel.com, that the people who are in the chat room right here on the Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint Show, for the people who email you at Local 10, want to see Omer Yurtseven, that ship has sailed. Bam is back. He's not going to be your starting center, but I do think Erik Spoelstra will try to create minutes. Erik Spoelstra likes to keep everyone engaged. And the way you keep everyone engaged in the NBA is with minutes.
Brandon asked this, and we were talking about the Cleveland matchup. Would you potentially see more bigs playing at the same time, and potentially Yurtseven playing with Bam? I know everybody asked, when can we see Bam playing with another center? But that may be one where now that you have a big man that has proven that you can trust him with those sorts of minutes, even during the regular season.
And this will get into next week because we're late in the show, but it's the thing is, will Eric Spoelstra ever go big? He didn't with Bam and Hassan Whiteside. He didn't with Bam and Dwayne Dedmon. He hasn't shown that inclination. Now, maybe when Dedmon's contract expires after the season and he has Omer in the final year of a deal and they have to make hay whether they're going to pay him as a free agent or not, maybe we get to that next year. That probably requires either Bam or Omer showing more of a three-point shot to space the floor, because Jimmy Butler's not a natural spacer anyway, and you don't want to pack the paint and take away the element you have of drive and kick there also. I think the bigger Omer Yurtseven question, long range, will Eric Spoelstra ever go big? I can't recall it at all in recent years.
Yeah, and I remember in the NBA Finals, and obviously Bam was hurt and trying to play through it, but they got to the point where I remember game one, it was, the Lakers' size and especially inside really gave the Heat a lot of problems. But then as the series went on, the Heat found out a way to play Dwight Howard off the floor. And then by the time you got to the clinching game, unfortunately, Vogel finally figured out this is it. We can't do the Dwight Howard thing anymore. So Spo would rather force your hand than the other way around. So I think he would try to find a way to get guys like Jared Allen and Evan Mobley out of their comfort zones and chase around players, much like, by the way, we saw last year in that Clippers-Jazz series where Terrence Mann kept bringing Rudy Gobert out.
Gobert became,
Those are kind of the chess pieces that we'll see, and the chess moves that we'll see in play as the playoffs roll on. All right, guys, you've been great as always. Heat Trailblazers coming up tonight.